You are listening to MCC Votes and Seats, the podcast series of the Center for Political Science of Mathias Corvinus Collegium. We provide election insights with experts and politicians.
Today we will discuss the results and the background of the parliamentary elections that were held in Estonia on the 5th of March. We have the privilege to have Dr. Heiko Pääbo, lecturer of politics of the Baltic Sea region countries. Hey Heiko, how are you doing?
Hello, thank you. I'm good.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
It's a pleasure.
Let's get started. The Estonian Centre Party formed a government after the 2019 parliamentary election, with Ratas serving as Prime Minister, Jüri Ratas. His government was brought down in January 2021 after a corruption investigation, and Kaja Kallas of the Estonian Reform Party formed a coalition government with the Centre Party afterward, which collapsed in June 2022. And Kallas then formed a government with Isamaa and the Social Democratic Party and remained in the position of the Prime Minister. This time, in March, the Reform Party won 37 seats and 31% of the vote in the Estonian parliamentary elections. Heiko, would you please tell us what were the major campaign issues and slogans in this election campaign?
There were two major topics. The first topic was, of course, security due to the war in our neighborhood, and therefore everything related to the military, assistance to Ukraine, and became one of the central questions. And another one was then subsistence or well-being of Estonians. This is also quite obvious due to the war, of course. There has been inflation, and prices have plummeted, and basically the question how people cope in this huge inflation. Estonia had last year in some months the highest inflation rate in Europe. It turned out that the security won in this context, that the security issues became predominant, and then people voted based on those messages delivered by the parties.
I see, so it's absolutely understandable how security issues and welfare of the population dominated the election campaign. Would you give us a more detailed insight how Russia's war in Ukraine appeared in the election campaign, how the different parties reacted to it and how they interpreted it?
Reform Party took very strong stance about security issues. Also, their main slogan was Estonia in firm hands. They were very strongly saying we should continue supporting Ukraine. Also, Kaja Kallas has been on European level, very active spokesperson for Ukraine assistance. The question of increasing our military budget, increasing NATO representation in Estonia, so that those were all these messages that the Reform Party brought up. In general, of course, most of the parties went along. No one really didn't take this very strong opposing position on this matter. Maybe the party that was completely neglected, the left, that has been complete marginal force until these elections, but they took very strongly pro-Kremlin position, and they made one of their best historical results. But of course, they didn't get to the parliament. They collected the protest vote of the Russian speakers, not that they definitely themselves support the war. Another party that maybe took slightly opposing was EKRE, this National Conservative Party. They gave out this very different messages, partly trying to take this stance what Orban has taken in Hungary, that this is not our war, so that why we should invest so much in Ukraine. If we give assistance to Ukraine, then it means that we are weakening our own security. Another thing was this negative positioning towards Ukrainian refugees. They are kind of Slavifying too much Estonian society. That was another message regarding this war. One of the biggest failure that also affected this result was that they started spread lies about this assistance what Estonia is giving to Ukraine, trying to dramatize everything. These lies went so far that finally the chief commander of Estonian army had to intervene and then correct those facts that the party was spreading. Another party which probably also was affected by this war was Center Party. Historically, Russian speakers have mainly voted for this party. On one hand, they definitely did not want to take the position and start to oppose, saying that no, we don't have to support Ukraine, but they definitely did not want to overestimate this topic because they realized that this can alienate some of their Russian speaker voters. This support among Russian speakers dropped below 50%. Social Democrats, they tried to combine these two messages, that coping and then security, so that they took this central logo, subsistence is security, trying to play with both topics. This didn't so much increase or lower the result that was expected. EKRE really tried. They already started in the end of the last year saying that the energy prices are outrageous high, and these prices are not because of war, but because of bad government and because of the green turn. And then if our government wouldn't be this kind of loyal puppy of Brussels, then they are able to offer extremely cheap price that none of the experts confirmed that this price is possible, what they suggested. Overall, Estonian society, this support to help Ukraine and then to understand what are at stake. And then the sanctions, more attitude that we should have harsher sanctions, not that these sanctions are undermining our economy so much. And then also it has brought the question of energy security, of course, made the governments to invest this new LNG terminal that was set up very quickly.
Before going more into detail about the election results, just to conclude the topic of regional geopolitical concerns, Dr. Pääbo, in terms of geopolitical orientations, how do you see what are the cornerstones of Estonia's regional identity among the parallel perceptions like the Baltic states region, Northern Europe, or does Estonia consider itself a Central East European country?
Actually, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was this kind of competition between Nordic versus Baltic, but particularly after the EU enlargement, this really has vanished. What Russia has done since 2014, it has brought also the Nordic countries closer to the Baltic states. We can say that today that this, if earlier there was this kind of different attitudes toward Russia, the Baltic states were very vocally critical and Nordic countries were concerned but not so vocal about it, then today this is really vanished. So that in that sense, I would say that either the Baltic Sea or Northern, but this is including also the Baltic, Latvia and Lithuania, Nordic Baltic together. This is this kind of cornerstone. And then of course, very strongly European, Western, and yeah, certainly Poland is also very important in this context. The Hungarian positioning is looked very concerningly that this is not well understood here.
So, as addressed before, the Reform Party won 37 seats with 31% of the vote in Estonia's 2023 legislative election. So, Kaja Kallas is on course to return as a prime minister and lead the next coalition. There are 101 seats in the Riigikogu, the Estonian parliament, and coalitions need 51 to form a majority. Now we have 6 parties represented in the next parliament. The Conservative People's Party of Estonia placed second with 17 seats. The Center Party won 16 seats with the loss of 10, while Estonia 200 won 14 seats. Kaja Kallas is a center-right liberalist Estonian Reform Party seems to be the biggest player. However, there are other political parties with seemingly similar ideologies and positions. What are the major differences between these political parties?
Definitely there is similarities. Actually, we can say that we have like two major poles. On one hand, there is this economic left-right. Most of political parties are in economic terms on the right. And there is, of course, the Reform Party, Isamaa, or this pro-Patria fatherland. Also this new party, the right. And then also another relatively new party, Estonia 200. It's also I would say, still on right, but this kind of right center. EKRE, this Estonian Conservative Party, it's also mainly on right, but in some questions they may jump to left as well. It's more this kind of populist in this economic questions. And then Center Party and Social Democrats and Greens, they are on this center left now on this economic scale. Then another dimension is this kind of conservative and liberal divide, where again the Greens, Social Democrats, they are the most liberal, social liberal parties. Estonia 200 is relatively close to them. Then this kind of on the border is Center Party. In some questions they are maybe more liberal, for example if it's in inclusion of Russian speakers, but in other questions, in the value question particularly, they are less social liberal, in some questions even conservative. I would say that they are rather falling more conservative. The right party, this new party, they are also more liberal than conservative, even though they come from fatherland of pro-patria. On conservative side, then we have the bigger player, Reform Party, that they are also liberal, but not so liberal as Social Democrats or Estonia 200, so that they're a little bit among those liberal parties, they are more conservatives, but certainly clearly on the liberal side. And then on conservative side, there are very clearly two parties, Isamaa, which is, let's say, moderate conservatives, but still clearly defining conservatives in value terms, and EKRE, this National Conservative Party, which is very extreme. Then you can take this different constellation. At the moment, Reform Party is negotiating with Estonia 200 and Social Democrats. In value terms, there is not a big contradiction between those parties.
Talking about the Social Democrats, so we could see that on the Estonian right wing, the party system is quite fragmented. However, the same applies to the leftist and center-leftist parties too, because we have Social Democratic Party, the Estonian Center Party, as you mentioned, Estonian Greens. So before addressing the prospects of future government formation, what can be said about these left-wing parties? What aspects connect them and what are the divisive lines?
Probably the thing what connects them is definitely that they would like to change the Estonian tax system, so that they would like to have a progressive tax system, and they would like to focus more on the peripheries, regional development, because there we have very clear divide between Tallinn and surroundings of Tallinn, Estonian capital, Southeast Estonia or Northeast Estonia, islands where these people's incomes are clearly lower than the rest of Estonia. Where Social Democrats and then the Green Party also very well would cooperate is green policies. Social Democrats already have come out with second elections where their party program is actually greener than the Greens party program, so that they definitely are on the same page also in all this green turn. And there I would say that the Estonian Center Party is lagging behind, so that they are emphasizing much more this economic dimension and then coping of people and then so on. They are not so readily going ahead with all these necessary reforms for the green turn. I would say that to some extent there is also this value question, what I mentioned before, that the Center Party is inclusive regarding to the Russian speakers, but their liberal view is in the value questions is more conservative than Social Democrats and the Greens.
We can see that the Reform Party has been given the mandate to form a government. There are already negotiations between the parties. Kaja Kallas herself said that it was clear that voters expected to see Estonia 200 in the government, while she also said that there were 4 possible coalitions for the Reform Party to form. However, later she invited, besides Estonia 200, as you mentioned, the Social Democrats for government talks. It was only EKRE that was ruled out from the coalition. What about the Estonian Center Party? After the 2019 parliamentary elections, they formed a government with Jüri Ratas, and it failed in January 2021 after corruption investigations. What was the afterlife of that case? Did it affect the 2023 electoral campaign? And did it affect the performance of the Centre Party?
It definitely had the impact. How big it was, it's difficult to say. Corruption issue was not central during these elections, but I think that as much in parallel to the elections, the court case was going on and the media was reporting about this as well. And actually there are several court cases. Centre Party had, due to this shady deals, they also were struggling financially. The poor outcome was very much due to the fact that they had much less funds in their budget than other parties did. It also probably had this impact on the voters that who voted earlier. They decided not to vote for them. This 2019, the way how Jüri Ratas formed the government, instead Reform Party, and then Kaja Kallas won the previous elections too. And then he made the deal with EKRE and then the pro-Patria or fatherland, leaving the winner aside, even though before the elections he said that the Centre Party is not able to form the coalition with EKRE due to the strong value opposition what those parties have. Some people dropped off due to this from their electoral list. They did not run. Majority would emerge in the parliament if Reform Party and Centre Party would form the government. But officially, why Reform Party rejected this idea was due to the educational reform that's ongoing in Estonia at the moment, that the Estonian school system will be merged all as a one Estonian language education. The Centre Party has been very strongly opposed this idea. Reform Party said that if they now form together this coalition with Centre Party, then it's not possible to move on with this reform. I think that another important aspect is also the way how Jüri Ratas behaved when Centre Party and Reform Party were in the coalitions in 21-22. He didn't go himself to the government. He didn't take any minister's position, and he started to play in the parliament this internal opposition to the government. When Centre Party ministers reached to the agreement in the cabinet with the Reform Party, he and then his fan club started immediately to criticize those agreements like he would be in opposition. And when the government fall at the end, he was really trying to make this government collapse, hoping to establish or to break the new government with EKRE and fatherland again.
I understand. So while the Centre Party has lost ground, as you mentioned, it had to say goodbye to 10 parliamentary seats. The biggest winner of the elections in relative terms was Estonia 200, which gained 14 seats more compared to the previous elections. Very briefly, could you tell us, what do you think, what was the secret of Estonia 200?
Partly, Estonia 200 took those protest votes, people who were tired of, because the previous parliament, this kind of political culture really went down. The way how parliamentarians spoke, how they were, basically it was certain teasing really was going on in the parliament. Definitely not very proper behavior. Certainly EKRE very much brought this style, but other parties started to take it up as well. Estonia 200, which was not in the parliament, then they really could say that they can bring something new, this new political culture, saying that there are issues which need long-term solutions, not this kind of tiny political negotiations. That was their plan. Plus, of course, they also could attract into the list very good candidates. Now they could bring in good specialists, people who are well known in their field, that contributed to their success.
So, besides the liberal Estonia 200, Kaja Kallas's Reform Party also became somewhat stronger, obtaining 3 seats more compared to the previous parliamentary elections. Let's focus now on the analysis on personal skills and charisma. Ms. Kallas has served served as a member of the European Parliament and has a degree in European law. How would you describe her attitudes towards EU policies?
Kaja Kallas is definitely clearly pro-European Union, pro-NATO. She already was known before she was Prime Minister, when she served in the European Parliament, that she had a very good connections there. This current situation really fits for her. I would say that the EKRE has really tried to establish her as some kind of monster or opposing character. She definitely has charisma, but she also has this kind of rational thinking. She is demanding this, not just to make decisions based on emotions, but she really wants to have this kind of argued positioning. Considering also that she got the absolute record in Estonian political history, how many votes one candidate can get, that also shows that she definitely has a very strong public support. In Estonian electoral system, you vote for candidates who are running in your constituency. That in some cases, probably people who voted for Reform Party, they did not vote so much for Reform Party, but for Kaja Kallas. For example, here in my constituency in Tartu mayor from Reform Party very clearly said that he is not planning to go to the parliament. He remains as a mayor, but he's supporting the party, and he still got the most votes in Tartu constituency, which also shows that many people very consciously voted for him, giving the vote indirectly to Kaja Kallas.
I understand. And now to conclude this most interesting conversation, Heiko, would you be that kind to share with us personally, what did you find the most outstanding in the March 2023 legislative election? Were there any surprises to you?
Clearly, there were surprises, and already months before, but also weeks before, all these opinion polls showed that it will be very close. So that between this conservative versus liberal, it was expected that EKRE is doing much better result, and these liberal parties that they remain weaker. Center party, EKRE and Pro-Patria, Fatherland, that they can form again the coalition. That fear was also in the air, and then all these kind of opinion polls showed one week that this is possible, another week that this possibility is not, so that this was very close. But then when the outcome came out, then we could see that actually the liberal parties, Reform Party, Social Democrats, Estonia 200, that they got now 60 seats out of 101, which is clearly above expectations. Another thing is this, that nobody couldn't expect the role of the left, because they decided to run together with some pro-Kremlin activists. They did surprisingly good results. If usually this party the left party hasn't collected even 1,000 votes in national elections, then this time they got over 14,000 votes. Of course, they didn't get to the parliament, but still this was this kind of signaling. Estonia 200 got to the parliament, that was expected, but they made their maximum, clearly. Social Democrats' result was surprisingly good, because there was the fear even in some point that they are not making to the parliament, because they were getting closer to this 5% threshold. But they lost one seat, but there was expected that Estonia 200 takes much more of their votes. And then certainly, the failure of EKRE, I would say. About Kesk or Center Party, it was expected that they are doing worse result. Maybe not that they are losing 10 seats, but this kind of worse result was expected. But about EKRE, that was not expected, that they are failing. They even didn't expect themselves. They were so sure that they are getting such, can have even possibility to form the government.
So Estonia is the most unique Baltic country located in the intersection of the Scandinavian region, Central East Europe, and neighboring Russia. The election had a very clear result, as we could see, but still there were some surprises as well. Prime Minister Kallas received a considerable support from her electorate that allows her to continue the Reform Party's pro-EU and pro-NATO and pro-Ukraine endeavors. Dr. Heiko Pääbo, lecturer of politics of the Baltic Sea region countries at the University of Tartu, thank you very much for sharing your most appreciated thoughts and opinion with us. I found this conversation extremely interesting and thought-provoking. We are grateful for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure on my side as well.
Dear listeners, you've been following the latest edition of the Votes and Seats podcast series of the Center for Political Science of Mathias Corvinus Collegium. Thank you for your kind attention. Stay tuned for the next episode of our series. Take care. Goodbye.